to do, and you need a little aid to get those decisions made. You know where to go, it's the one and only show, Major Confusions. Ding.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dina, and welcome to the Intertwined podcast by Major Confusions, where we demystify how impact driven and sustainable careers are built in the real world. We're here with Jane, who is what I call a compassionate high achiever. You'll hear how the very positive traits of being high achieving can take us to places where we don't want to be, and how being compassionate in the workplace is the harder but kinder and better choice for both Jane and the business. You'll hear her story of how early academics' ups and downs formulated her path, and how her constant reflection and self knowledge, combined with an intentionally strong support system, have led her to where she is today. I love this conversation with Jane, and I hope you do too. Thank you for listening to this episode, and most importantly, thank you, Jane, for sharing your story with us today. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Dina.
Thank you for being with us today. We're going to start with the first question, which is, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were younger?
When I was little, I wanted to be a vet. That was I loved animals. I mean, who doesn't love animals and want to look after them? So yes, that was definitely my first love, was wanting to be a vet.
What attracted you besides loving animals?
I, th- I think I was always told that I was clever at school, so it was always kind of that, well, you have to be clever to be a vet or to be a doctor or to be a lawyer, and yeah, and then it was just that I really love animals, and why wouldn't I want to spend all my time cuddling puppies and cats and horses, and yeah, pretty much I wouldn't have known actually what it was all about when I was little.
Yeah. And then how did it go from there? What were your interests like in school?
Yeah, so I've always liked science. I've always enjoyed it. I've always found maths relatively straightforward. So for me, those were the kinds of areas I liked, and that fitted with things like wanting to be a vet, which then moved into wanting to be a doctor. Um, as probably a little bit more sensible and less likely to get injured by the patient. So I always kind of looked at science as something that I was really interested in, especially on the biology side. I always really enjoyed learning about how the body worked, how plants worked, how all the different parts of nature existed and worked together.
And then you said you wanted to be a doctor. At what
Yeah,
age did that shift happen? I don't know if you remember, or
I
what
think that
grade.
probably came in the kind of the switch from primary school to secondary school. Around there, it became a little bit more realistic as to what was good for me as a career. And then that was pretty much what I was looking for throughout secondary school in terms of what I was working towards. So that was very much my pick for the school subjects. So I did 3 sciences at A level, plus maths. So it was very much all around pushing towards good grades to go and be able to do medicine at a good university. Um,
How did you feel like this came? Did it come from you, or did you feel influenced by the surroundings, like from the school or family or
I I think
siblings?
to I think to some extent it was school. So I remember doing the kind of the career quizzes at school, and then there were like 2 or 3 that we must have done, and every time they kind of came out with, "You're good at science, you enjoy science, doctor, vet." Um, I kept getting fish farmer. I remember that, and that's just like so different to being a doctor. Funnily enough, I didn't end up doing any farming of fish.
No.
So yeah, but it felt like anytime there was a careers thing, there wasn't really that many choices. It was very much, if you were bright, you were looking at being a doctor, a lawyer. If you were in sciences, maybe being a researcher and working towards being a professor. But yeah, it did feel like that there were relatively limited options.
Yeah, I feel like there are some careers that are really well advertised and branded, and everything else you find about way later in life.
For sure.
So then, so you chose the sciences. Was that an easy decision? It was quite, I guess, natural for you to choose them.
It was. I remember at GCSE though having this kind of massive disagreement with my parents because I wanted to do drama as well. Um, and it would have I either had to do drama instead of something like history, or I would have had to have only done double sciences rather than triple sciences, and they won, and I did fifth sciences and history, and to be honest, they were right.
Okay.
My friends were doing drama, and it looked fun, and everything else was really academic, so I wanted something that was a bit different. But yeah, in hindsight, they were definitely right.
Did you try to dabble with drama outside of school? Or?
Um, Not so much out of school, but I did do like the school plays and things. So so various very minor roles, but
Yeah. How are you like outside of school?
um, probably fairly quiet. So at secondary school, I had a slight disadvantage compared to my peers in that my dad worked at the school, so he was
Oh,
the head of the school. So I had plenty of friends, and that was fine. But yeah, it meant I couldn't get away with like um being naughty, basically. Although there were occasions as I got a little bit older and was certainly then off kind of with friends, um, sneaking to bars and pubs and clubs and things in sixth form, and I do remember one occasion if my dad was teaching some others in the school who had seen me at a club and asked if I'd had a nice time. That was when my dad found I wasn't actually staying at my friend's house.
uh-oh.
So one of the few times I was naughty, I got caught.
So it didn't really help to create a cycle of naughty afterward.
So mostly I was fairly quiet and studious, but did rebel occasionally.
That's good. Ah, so I guess I guess you did the sciences, and then did you end up becoming a doctor? How did that transition go from high school to university life?
So yeah, so my my transition and into early university was quite different. So I did get accepted to do medicine. I got accepted to do medicine at Oxford. Um, so I did it through the at the time, I don't even know if they still do it, but there was an entrance exam. So actually all I needed to get out of my four A levels was two E's
Oh my
because I'd
God.
done the entrance exam, I'd been accepted. Um, which didn't help with the trying to rebel. Uh, hey, I didn't need great grades. I did get great grades and I did study, but it didn't help with the motivation, that's for sure. So yeah, so I went from school to university in Oxford to do medicine. Um, but I didn't graduate as a doctor. So I wasn't very well when I was in my second year. So was basically asked to leave by the college. So I failed exam. I was ill. I failed exams. I was allowed to kind of resit the year. Still wasn't really well enough to sit the exams. So I actually ended up getting what's called in Oxford getting sent down. Sounds a lot better than getting kicked out, but pretty much
Mm.
that was where I was. So yeah, I left Oxford after 2 years. Three years in real time. Kind of actually only had passed one year. Tried to do the second year twice. So didn't have a degree at that point. But I was really lucky because through my dad, who knew people at the school that I'd gone to and he taught at, we knew some professors at Swansea University. Um, so my dad had taught this professor's daughter, and so he worked in the biology and genetics department, and arranged we kind of put together an interview, and I could go and I could transfer into the second year of a genetics degree at Swansea. So I lived in Swansea at the time, so I was able to live with my parents as well. So I kind of had the university experience. I lived away from home. I had all of that fun. And then when I really needed to knuckle down after having been poorly and not doing well, then I was able to live at home and get the advantages of being looked after by mum and dad.
Oh, that's sweet. How did you navigate that, if you don't mind, like talking
It
a
was
bit more
hard.
about that? Yeah.
It was really, really tough. And I'd say between kind of having to leave Oxford and figuring out exactly where I was going to end up, that was really, really tough and probably some of the lowest times I've had in my life. Um, because for somebody like me, where you put so much stock in being academic and achieving and being everything that everybody expects you to be, to suddenly fail and get told that you're not good enough is really hard to take, and to not know what comes next when you've defined yourself entirely on I'm working towards being a doctor and academic achievement. So yeah, that was a really tough summer. So yeah, it was not a good place to be. Um, and it did take a lot of effort to kind of even get myself to the point that I was willing to think about going back to university and trying to at least get a degree out of what I was doing.
Yeah, I think we don't talk enough about how hard that transition to university is, and especially going to like like high performing, like kind of one of the best universities. It's like, okay, there's this expectation that you're gonna perform. You've just left your house, and there's like life happens, you get ill, and then you still need to keep going at the pace that you've been going, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna talk badly of the whole circumstance. It was horrible at the time, but in hindsight, it probably is the best thing that ever happened,
Yeah,
because everything that's followed that has been good wouldn't have happened without having gone through that.
that's true. It like defines us and you can learn from it, and then it becomes like a very positive experience retrospectively, probably not in the moment.
No, it was, yeah, literally at the time, it was the worst thing that could have ever happened and had ever happened, and it was not a good place to be.
Yeah. How did you end up kind of getting the support you needed to kind of say, like, okay, let's try again with this different degree?
Is it, some of it was through friends, some of it was just kind
Mm.
of having them keep telling me that I can do this and that I could be successful, and of course I was clever enough. Um, some of it's just my own kind of bloody mindedness, that
Mm,
it was like I ain't gonna be just sat here and doing nothing and forever. So I've got to do something, and um, work that I've done more recently on kind of self-awareness and with my coach has very much shown that courage is one of my strengths. And when you look back, you say, well, probably courage is kind of what was getting me through at that point.
yeah. What was your learning kind of going through that, looking back now?
Looking back, like I said, I think actually in hindsight it's the best thing that ever happens, but it
Mm,
didn't feel like it, because it did feel like my entire life felt like it was falling apart.
mm,
In hindsight, it wasn't, and I still had health, I still had opportunity, still had somewhere to live. It was, you kind of look back and you think actually it wasn't as bad as it felt at the time, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a bad experience and it wasn't a bad experience. It was perfectly valid to be that upset and unhappy and distraught at what was happening. So
yeah,
actually, a learning point is that it's okay to feel it at that time, because you can learn from it.
exactly. Do you have any advice for anybody going through this at the moment in university?
It doesn't matter what you do; you've got to do what's right for you. So
Oh,
if it feels difficult, you might want to keep trying if that feels right for you. If it's difficult and it doesn't feel right to keep trying, that's also okay. You've
yeah.
got to do what makes you happy.
It's kind of like it's okay. Yeah. So I guess, like you said, your dad helped you to kind of get to the to Swansea University. What made you choose the genetics degree?
So, so some of the few things that had gone right at Oxford in terms of what I'd enjoyed and what I'd passed exams for was around biochemistry and genetics. So it kind of felt like, well, that's probably a good place to go because at least um, some level of confidence that I can pass exams in those kinds of topics. So it's not just going back to the beginning and worrying that I'm not going to be capable of doing it. So that was one of the key reasons. So a little bit it was manipulating myself into kind of a level of confidence that I was going to be okay. Um,
Did you enjoy it particularly more while at Oxford, these courses, like other than just doing well in them? Did you feel like,
yeah, I think so. I think they were more enjoyable. There were others that I did enjoy that then I didn't pass the exams in, but I think the combination of enjoying and passing exams was what meant that they were a good choice for picking up later.
that's true, it's like it's an overlap. Yeah. Um, so how did it go in Swansea? How was that transition? Probably nice
Um,
to be back at home with the support of
yeah,
the
I mean
family.
that was nice having food cooked for you and you walking done and it wasn't that far physically, so you could kind of just like get the bus or walk or cycle. So it wasn't a terrible transition on the practical point of view. But actually it was, I mean, it was daunting starting into the second year of a course where everyone else already knew each other.
Mm,
That was really really daunting. But actually, there was some other people on the course that were also people that lived at home, either with their parents or some that they were more mature students, so they had their own families and were living at home. So it kind of gave places where I felt a little bit more um, normal than
mm,
necessarily just being like the 18, 19-year-olds that were away from home for the first time. And yeah, that at that point I was 21, so it was, and I'd gone through a whole load of rubbish in my life, so it didn't really feel like that was the life I needed. What I needed was a bit of stability. So it was daunting, but there were people that felt like they were more similar to my circumstance, and they were really welcoming, which was wonderful because they didn't need to be, but I guess people are generally quite nice.
yeah, that's lovely. It's kind of like you felt like you knew what you wanted. You could have gone that student life again. It's just like you appreciated that stability.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is the studying? So you studied biochemistry and genetics?
So my degree ended up being in genetics, and that had all sorts of different bits. So it's predominantly different genetics things, but it had biochemistry in it. There were some optional modules. So I could do animal behavior, back to the wanting to be a vet when I was a kid.
Mm.
And module on population genetics, which then was very maths focused. So it was pulling in a lot of things that I used to enjoy when I was a bit younger, and had enjoyed at school. Um, so it was a weird experience because obviously I still kept carrying that kind of, well, what if it all goes wrong, um,
Mm.
kind of feeling. So I think going through that second year, which was my first year in Swansea, and getting through the exams, getting good marks was a huge deal, a really huge deal in terms of giving myself the confidence that I could move on and I was still okay, and yeah, I could still be good.
Yeah. Do you feel like there was some element in the environment that allowed you to flourish more in Swansea than at Oxford, for example?
It was way more relaxed, that's for sure.
Mm,
Um, I think partly I probably was more relaxed after the initial kind of anxiety about starting again. Um,
mm,
I mean, I had friends in both places, so I can't say that it was different from it. I didn't have more friends in either place. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's next to the beach, Swansea University, so there's like literally the university, a road, and then it's the beach. So I mean, that probably helps.
yeah, there's something about water. I think just being close to water is so nice. Oh. So I guess looking back at your genetics degree, what do you feel like? Because sometimes we study something and we just don't remember what we study. So we remember a few things that actually stick? So for you, what do you feel like stuck with you from your genetics degree?
Um, I think there's a few things that stick. Some are funny, some are less fun. I remember in the first year I was there that we had a labs experiment thing we were doing, and it was just as the Rugby World Cup was starting that year, and I'm a huge Wales supporter, so I had a radio in my pocket while we were trying to do experiments so that I could listen to listen to the rugby, which you would think would be fine in Wales, but apparently it wasn't. So that's definitely memorable. I think there was a particular professor that I really enjoyed kind of learning from, and I did my third year project under his supervision, and he was fantastic. Sadly, he passed away not that long after I graduated. But yeah, he definitely left a mark on kind of how I perceived myself and how I thought I could be. And yeah, he was different. He was one of these kind of people that always just says it how they think it and doesn't really filter it. And he always used to walk around campus in this kind of massive trench coat and like a fedora hat. He was amazing, ridiculous but amazing. So yes, I mean that's pretty memorable. And I think I came out of university having I got a first. I won a prize for the marks. So I think really the kind of memorable thing is that it proved to me, it showed me and showed other people that I was capable. Again,
Again, yeah, that's amazing. Going back to your professor, what was his main influence on you?
I think the main influence was his building my confidence, that he didn't need to kind of give me extra time and explain things and look after me in the way he did, but he did. And I think that just gave me confidence that, again, that I could do it, that somebody else could see that I could do it, and they were willing to put time and effort into it.
It's so crucial. I think everybody in life really needs that, and just finding that is such a gift.
Yeah, he was not far off a mentor. He's
Oh,
certainly a role model.
so did you know when you were in university, like, did you know what I want to do after university, kind of planning forward, or was it studying
It
genetics? I want to do well.
so I knew that I wanted to do well, in part to prove to myself and to prove to others that I could do it. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next, because I'd spent so long kind of working towards medicine, wanting to be a doctor, and then it was kind of like, well, that's clearly changed. What do I want to do next? Um, what I did know was that nothing really ever worked in the lab properly. So I didn't want to stay in science. So I didn't do a PhD. It just wasn't me. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I'd have been miserable if I'd spent the rest of my life trying to do experiments that failed. Um, so actually, I didn't really know. The career service at the university kind of had the standard ones. Well, there's all of the kind of the management consultants and accountancy firms and all of the kind of standard careers. But actually, a friend of mine from back when I was at Oxford had said, "Well, I've been told about this career as a patent attorney, that it wasn't something that he wanted to do, but said, oh, it sounds like something you might like." So I started looking into it. It was kind of it was before finals. So in the run up to finals, I was starting to research about careers and options. So yeah, and it just sounded interesting. It allowed you to keep science while learning other things and doing different things, but not being in the lab. Um, so decided to start applying for roles. And the patent profession is quite small, so there's not really kind of a set of adverts, at least at the time. for trainee roles, it was just kind of like just write to everybody in the country that is a pattern firm and see what happens. So that was kind of how I fell into my current profession.
Wow, that's incredible. So you were actively trying to think about what careers can I do with the degree that I have?
Yeah, yeah. And while I did a lot of applications for patent firms, I also had kind of backup applications with accountancy firms because patents is also really small profession, so it's difficult to get into. And I know I needed a job of some kind, so it was just, well, I'll try everything I could do to get into patents, but I'll have a backup option. Um, so,
Wow. How did that I don't like, how did that application process go?
uh, well, because it was just right to every firm pretty much at the time. A little bit different now, but then it was right to every firm. So it was just like 150 letters and CVs going out and mostly hearing nothing. I think I ended up with maybe 4 or 5 interviews in total, one job offer.
I love this. S- For actually just to patent attorney, even though it's in the law field, you don't need a law degree, right?
Correct. You have to have a science degree
You have to
to
have
be
a
a
sign.
patent attorney. Um, because the entire point is that we work with scientists and inventors. So the legal requirement for the patent officers is that for our qualification, is we have to have a science degree or engineering or maths. But the idea is that we are able to understand the technology so that we can ensure that they are protected correctly under the law.
Yeah. So tell us about the first. So you got your first job offer. I guess you didn't need to continue job hunting for accounting roles at that point.
Um, I'd also had a second interview for an accountancy job about a week before, and I'd already got an offer for that. And I just kept waiting and waiting for a job offer or to hear back on the patent role. And in the end, I took a punt on turning down the accountancy role and still
Mm.
waiting for the patent one and hoping that I got the patent job, which I did, and I'm still here. So
That's great. So it's also courage, what you were saying before. It's
yeah,
really courage to say, actually, this is what I'm leaning towards.
yeah. If it hadn't come off, I'm not quite sure what I'd have done, but I'd have figured something out, I guess.
Right, other offices. The one. Why accountancy, actually, just before we move?
I think it felt like a kind of a relatively straightforward career that with a maths and science background, it was easy to kind of get into or relatively easy to get into and be good at, even if it wasn't kind of the perfect career. It was something that I could definitely do.
Yeah. It's a kind of like management consulting and kind of inviting to different
Yeah,
types of degrees, and then you go in and learn on the spot.
yeah.
Um, so how was your first job as a patent attorney?
Um, well, 22 years later, I'm still with the firm.
With the
Uh,
firm
yeah, same firm.
as a
So yeah, so
partner in the firm.
and now I'm a partner. Started as a trainee, with no knowledge whatsoever. Yeah, so started, turned up, was put into an office with somebody who became my friend, and yeah, he was then an usher at my wedding, and he's now our managing partner. So um, and yeah, my boss at the time was a partner then, and he's now one of the partners in my department that I'm head of department for, and he's retiring at the end of the year. So
Wow.
yeah, so I've started with people that it's kind of come all the way through. But yeah, first day was just wow. I have no idea what I'm doing. Why am I here? At least I turned up on time. Um, so the kind of, I guess, normal first day nerves, difficulties. Back in that day, not everything was computerized. So we're talking
Mm.
2001. It's so for us, yes. computers clearly existed, and email and all the rest of it. But a lot of the things we were doing were still we were still writing letters that were sent to post. You couldn't necessarily get some of the information you wanted off the internet. You had to write to patent offices to get copies sent to you. Now it's all instantly available online, touch of a button. So I'm making myself sound so old. But yeah, first day it was exciting and difficult and everything else you expect it to be.
How much did you know about patent law? I mean, what did you know about the field, and what did it turn out to be? Because I feel like
Uh,
also we enter jobs without knowing what they are. I mean, your friend told you about it.
in terms of what I knew it was kind of a mashup of science and law, and at the time languages to some extent, because we in the UK we act at the UK Patent Office and we act at the European Patent Office, and the European Patent Office works in English, French, and German. And so I knew that the exams to qualify, there was some level of needing languages. So the exams are slightly different now, but at least when I qualified, you had to have documents in a language other than your own to be able to analyze as part of the exam. So I knew it was going to be science, law, and languages. Um, I think what I didn't realize was quite how much you needed to be able to think about psychology and how other people work,
Mm,
because a lot of what we do is argumentation. So how do you persuade people to your way of thinking? How do you asking the right questions, listening in the right way, listening to understand rather than listening to reply, the all really important parts of what we do so that we understand what it is that inventors are telling us, what the patent office are telling us. So there was a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know I would end up on a path that ended up in kind of management and leadership. So that's clearly skills I have had to develop and learn along the way that I didn't have when I started.
yeah. How was that path, I guess, started as a trainee and then kind of growing within the company?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're a trainee, you just feel very small and insignificant.
Yeah.
The firm doesn't charge very much for your time. You get everything wrong. Everything you do work. It goes to your supervisor, and it all comes back changed. But that's the role. That's the role of the trainee, is to have a go, learn the job, and eventually, with practice, be producing work that is actually useful and can be charged to clients. That's at a reasonable amount. So it's a really steep learning curve, patents, really steep, because everyone comes from science. It's rare that people come in with any legal knowledge.
Mm,
It does happen occasionally, but it's pretty rare. So you're coming in with a science background and suddenly having to learn all about legal concepts, which are very different, very, very different to science. Um, so it's a massive learning curve, and that makes it hard. Um, there are a lot of exams, and it takes kind of 4 or 5 years for for doing it quickly to qualify.
mm,
It's pretty normal to fail exams because they are difficult. So it's not an easy kind of initial part of the career, and particularly the way I did it was very much you do the exams as part of kind of learning on the job. So you do your day job, you go on revision courses, and you sit exams at some point. So you're kind of working all day, revising all evening, weekends at certain times of the year. There are some other routes, but it's kind of horses for courses. They are more book based, so you're not getting the practical experience. So for some people that suits well, but they don't get the practical experience. The way I did it, more practical experience, just less time to be able to do stuff. So like I say, horses for courses, different ways of doing it. You get to the same place in the end. No, it's just it's a really difficult and steep learning curve. But yeah, so we have two qualifications. So we are UK patent attorneys for the
mm,
UK qualification, and then we are European patent attorneys as well. So we have a European qualification that enables us to act at the European patent office.
Oh, okay. So it's basically you started off as a trainee, and that's still not, you still need to do the exams and the kind of the process in order to
Correct.
qualify.
Yeah. So, like I say, 4 or 5 years on a good pace. It can be a little bit longer. And there's actually a requirement that you've done 3 years as before you're allowed to sit the European exams. So to make sure that you've got at least a minimum amount of experience.
It's nice that it was practical. So you kind of know, you kind of have worked in the field before even qualifying. So you know what this is preparing you
For
to
sure.
do.
And for me, I liked the practical route because it meant when you were learning concepts, the legal concepts, you'd actually seen them. You'd seen them in a file. You'd seen them for a client. You'd heard a partner describe them to a client. It became, for me, I thought that was a lot simpler.
As someone who was, I'm asking this kind of putting myself in your shoes, like someone good at math and like kind of the sciencey part, I always felt like law was for people who are good at history. I don't know, how did it happen that you're like, actually, I'm gonna bridge these two worlds and I'm into that?
Yeah, I think for me that because it was about how do I keep the science, how do I keep
Mm,
the science, but knowing I don't want to be in the lab, and then you start to get into, well, pretty much then you are behind a desk of some kind, unless you're going to go back to fish farming, maybe.
not happening.
Still didn't feel right. Um, but yeah, so then you kind of know you're going to have to do some level of writing with it. So there's medical writing, scientific writing,
Mm.
journalism, that kind of stuff. And so actually, you're kind of already looking in that area of having to bridge science with some form of um, at a desk writing. So then law doesn't become such a weird concept. Yeah, it's. I think there's also the challenge because it's different. It is so different to where you've come from as a scientist. Learning something new, but keeping your hand in on the science is really nice. So it is challenging, and
Mm.
one of the good things about patents is that it means it's new things coming along. That's inevitably part of invention and looking for patent protection for our clients is that they've invented new things. So you come across new things regularly, so that keeps bringing challenge and something a bit different.
How do you keep on top of the learning while you're in the job?
Um, with difficulty, uh, yeah, it's it's challenging, I think is probably the best way to put it. So it's once you're qualified as a patent attorney, you still have to do continuous education anyway to keep up the kind of your legal knowledge and your ability to act for clients. So that is part of it. Keeping up with the science is a little harder because there's a lot going on, and certainly in the time I've been a patent attorney, genetics and biotech as a whole has just flown completely. So when I started, they'd just done the human genome sequence that's just been published, and then now we're talking about things like CRISPR and all of these crazy, crazy things that are really just you'd yeah you just wouldn't have dreamt of back then, and that's what 20 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. And then in parallel to learning the sciencey part, you were also developing your skills in the management and leadership.
Yeah, so it's funny because we start as a trainee. We have no law experience. We have our science experience, but we come in as an attorney, as a fee earner, and that means that we have to work with support teams. We have to work with secretaries and paralegals, and so you start having to delegate work from day one, which is really tough. I mean, straight out of university, you yeah, wouldn't necessarily say boo to a goose. And then suddenly you're having to I don't know, ask a secretary with 25 years of experience to do work for you. And you're like, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. So how the heck do I ask them to do it? Um, so you start having to learn to delegate and manage other people from day one, which adds to the kind of really steep learning curve.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. the firm I'm with, the people are really good. The people are really nice, and that really helps. And I would say actually the intellectual property profession, full stop, so patents and trademarks, tends to be a little bit more kind of softer than most lawyers. And I think the patent side, because we come from a science background rather than a true law background, we're definitely not stereotypical lawyers.
Mm.
So I think that helps. The people we work with, the support teams, are therefore a little bit more relaxed. We tend to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit different. We also tend to be geeks, which also kind of helps.
The best type of people.
Exactly. That's what I think. um, so yeah, so that's it. It's kind of tough starting to have to learn management of people and leadership right from the beginning and day one. And you don't necessarily get taught any of those skills. And then for me, I've just found it's grown naturally over time, and I've stepped up and taken on my own trainees as I qualified and could then teach others. So have built teams under me, and brought them through the business as well. So I think for me, it's mostly been a kind of an organic growth of
Mhm.
that ability. And in many ways, I that's great. And in many ways, it's really not great because it would be lovely to have been taught some of the things. And I think I'm lucky. I think I'm probably naturally good at some of these things. And I know it's really difficult for some of my colleagues. So it's not always easy to develop those skills. But for me, it's been a hugely exciting part of the journey. And by learning management, by being pretty decent at it, by being a relatively natural leader, I think that my team respects me. I think that they like me, that they want to work for me and with me. And certainly I've kind of come through sort of trainee all the way through to partner, and then I'm currently head of department for the biotech team. So it's not quite a full-time management leadership role, but it takes up a huge amount of the work I do, and the time that I have is managing the team and leading the team and trying to push our department as much as I can to get us in a great shape.
Yeah. What do you feel stands out about your leadership or your leadership style that kind of makes it such a nice space to work with you?
Um, um, I think that people trust me. And I tend to be fairly authentic and vulnerable. So I'm generally pretty happy to talk about if I'm struggling or I can't cope or if I'm not well. And I've always tried to have fairly strict work-life boundaries. I try very hard not to look at email outside of work hours, or certainly outside of when I know I'm working. And I encourage my teams to be the same. Doesn't always work, um, but by trying to be open and transparent and authentic and vulnerable. And yeah, I mean, I think all of my team know that I've had mental health problems and I've had time off for burnout, and I don't shy away from talking about those things. And and I hope that's why they trust me.
Yeah, I feel yeah, making yourself vulnerable, saying kind of the truth and being open allows them to be open in return.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully, obviously.
And I
Yeah.
think for me, if they can trust me, then they feel safe. And I think everything about leadership comes back to psychological safety. If people feel safe, if they feel comfortable, then they're going to be happier. And ultimately, for me, that's going to be better for the business.
Yeah. So many directions. Can you talk about actually it's kind of about better for the business, like kind of how do you as a leader kind of justify because it's kind of like slowing down to give your team time, right? And then it's like people could perceive that as like let's just go fast and yeah,
Yeah,
how do you kind of justify this the effort to create such psychological safety for for the business to do well?
it's it's difficult to justify because it's not always easy to quantify that actually does have an impact on the bottom line. And I'm honestly sure that there are probably people within the business that don't agree with the way I do
Yeah.
things. And that's fine. They think it should be done a different way, and we have different leadership styles and different ways of thinking that our way is the right way for the business. But for me, I think it really does come down to if you can create that trust and safety that people feel like that they can be themselves and that they can raise problems and that they're not going to be punished for that, that they're going to be heard, then they're going to be happy. They're going to be more engaged. And if you look at that in terms of being better for the business, if they're happier and more engaged, they're more likely to be productive. And if you can bring in the psychological safety, then for me, it gets the discretionary efforts. So people will do their job, but actually, if they trust the people that the person they're working for or the people they're working for, that they trust that I have their best interests at heart and I'm there with them, working hard and looking after them, then they'll go the extra mile. They'll put that discretionary effort in, and that has to be good for the business. And I like to think, at least, like what the time that I've been head of department, our department has performed best financially relative to targets and budgets. So I like to think I'm doing something right. I mean, the team are working really hard, and they're the ones
Of
doing
course.
the real hard work. But yeah, I'm hoping that I'm contributing by supporting them and engaging them and getting them to the right place.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, I guess what's special about your journey is that you've stayed with the firm for, you mentioned 22 years, and
Yeah.
that's fairly unique in in the world we live in today. I think the maximum I've stayed in a company was 2 years and a half. So,
We have people that have been with us well over 30 years.
what, like, how does that happen?
Um, I, th- I think it's genuinely been a good place to work. We try to treat our staff well. I think with primarily being based in Nottingham, we have always historically attracted kind of local talent that is for kind of the support teams, and from the attorney side, we've typically attracted the people that don't really want to work in London. So then you actually get people that then don't really want to move around a lot. They're
Mm,
quite happy to be where they are, and by treating them in a pretty decent way and paying well and giving them good conditions has been a real boon. And I think I've already said the people are genuinely really nice. Yeah, I have great friends here at work. I always have, and I met my husband here. So
oh,
yeah,
yeah. Where do you feel that niceness stems from? Like, how do you create a culture of people being nice and obviously maintaining it over time? Because I feel there needs to be some sort of accountability or
yeah.
maintaining standards.
I think it's reasonable to say that we've struggled, and certainly recently because we've got a lot bigger recently.
Mm,
So for a long time we were Nottingham based. And then in 2018 we opened London office, we opened a Copenhagen office, we opened a Stockholm office. We suddenly just massively kind of have changed from where we had been. So I think the niceness has come from the people, and we generally have
mm,
nice people. We allow people to be themselves, but it hasn't been easy the last 5 years, because we're then having to bridge kind of a Midlands northern culture to
mm,
London, which is very different, and we're having to bridge from the UK culture over to the Nordics. And Denmark and Sweden have very different cultures to us. So it isn't easy, and we don't always
um,
succeed. And I can't deny that we have people that are unhappy at times.
um,
But we strive very hard to say that we are growing, we are changing, we're trying to be more commercial, but we're trying to retain as much of that kind of friendly family feel. And I'm never a big
Mm.
fan of calling work family. But that feeling of everybody kind of knowing who each other is and liking each other and that kind of friendly family feel. So it isn't easy at all.
Yeah, you mentioned burnout yourself. How did you navigate the burnout at work? And you mentioned you took some time off.
Yeah. So I had a kind of an 18-month period where I was working on a particularly busy project, and I ended up working. I think I booked something like 3 times my actual target
Oh.
for booked hours, and this was before I was head of department. So all I was doing was this the normal work at the time. But yeah, it wasn't fun. It was constant, and it's funny because I will always say that project was probably still the highlight of my career because it was a litigation case. It meant a lot in terms of the outcome of the case. I was working with a great team, not just the people I'd normally work with. They're working with lawyers, met loads of new people, traveled to the US and then Denmark to meet with experts. It was a blast. Um,
Mm,
but it was also really bloody hard work. And I just kept pushing myself and kept pushing myself. And because I was one of the more senior patent attorneys on the team, I was very much trying to lead by example, not necessarily getting it right. Um, but I certainly didn't want people to have to do things that I wasn't willing to do myself. So traveling, it was kind of, I certainly wasn't going to ask somebody to go fly to San Diego for 2 days if I wasn't willing to do that. It's um, because it sounds great flying to San Diego for 2 days, but flying to San Diego for 2 days, flying back, never quite getting on the time zone, then having to do something else or fly somewhere else, it's not fun at all.
mm,
So yeah, so I just kept pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself, and the case settled. And I remember the night we settled. And I've talked about this before, so it's nothing particularly shocking to anybody. But the night we settled, we had a big party and lots of great food and great time. And I went to bed and I just woke up in the night crying, absolutely sobbing, because it was just kind of like finally mind, body going, oh my God, it's over. Um, so
wow.
yeah, so it was really insidious though, because I didn't see it coming because I was enjoying myself and it kind of crept up in terms of the amount of work I was doing and it just ramped up. Um, so I tried to take some holiday, hoping that that would fix it. But yeah, that
Mm,
didn't work. And it just became really clear that I was exhausted, really fed up with work, didn't have any interest. And yes, the doctor signed me off.
wow. How did that help? Did you take time off, I guess,
So I
after?
had I had a month off entirely, and then was on a phased return over about 2-3 months,
Oh, wow.
gradually taking it back up to full time. Um, and to a person at the firm, people were so supportive. Nobody batted an eyelid as to the reasons I was off. Um, to be honest, most of them probably predicted it was going to happen, but it was people were really really supportive, and that surprised me how supportive people were. Um, to take that much time off is in our profession is quite difficult because
Mm,
most of our day-to-day work is really kind of deadline driven. It's we have to do that by that deadline, otherwise we might lose the patent rights for something really really valuable. Um, so people did have to take on a lot to help cover me when I wasn't going to be available. But they all did it, and my team in particular were brilliant. That took everything, and were really, really good, and looked after my clients. And to be honest, I've always been honest with clients, and the client that I'd been doing the project and the litigation for, they know that
oh, wow.
afterwards that I was off because I was poorly, and and I still work for that client. Um, yeah, and yeah, they've sent more work and more work, and they've appreciated what we've done, what I've done, and the effort that we'll put in, but also that we do recognize that it is can be problematic.
Yeah. What helped you recover?
I think for me, the time off just allowed me to rest, and we, my husband and I and the dog would go out every single day um, to the local country park. It did help that the local country park had a really nice cafe with scones.
Oh.
That did become a fixture. Uh, but yeah, that idea of just getting out, resting, and getting out and trying to not think about work, not think about putting myself under pressure to do anything in particular other than just kind of exist.
Yeah. It's interesting that you came back to the same firm because you might think like kind of burning out and thinking, oh, this is the company culture here. Um, whereas it felt like you were okay with the company.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't so much the company itself. A lot of it was me. A lot of it was
Mm,
just I didn't look after myself well enough to say, no, Jane, you're not going to be working at 10 o'clock at night every night and then up a ridiculous o'clock in the morning, and then you're not going to go and fly to San Diego and then fly to Copenhagen and then fly back to San Diego.
mm.
I needed to take some ownership.
That's really important. It's true. It's like what part of it was us kind of overachieving and working too hard versus kind of, yeah, taking ownership and accountability for our own action.
And it's a difficult one because we need to take ownership. We need to say no.
Mm,
But I found that it was really hard to do that because the work still needed to be done.
yeah. And you didn't want to impose on your team as well.
Yeah, who were also working very long hours and really
Yeah.
hard. So it's really tough.
I think it's really hard. Yeah. So what did you learn after this to help you prevent it moving forward?
I think what I've learned is that I have to pay attention to myself, and I'm still not very good at it.
Mm,
I'm better. Uh, when a potentially similar project came up a couple of years ago, I actually voluntarily decided to start therapy so that I could kind of try to just keep an eye on myself and recognize if I was starting to slip and just get into that frame of mind where, yeah, I'm going to do everything and all of that. The project actually has never actually materialized or hasn't materialized yet. Um, but I'm still in therapy
yeah.
and I still do that.
Kind of like keeping it's kind of preventive therapy but as a preventative, but also as like just ongoing
Yeah,
self-reflection.
yeah. And I mean, I actually think that it's probably one of the best things I've ever done. I've been coached and I continually have coaching and being in therapy. I genuinely think they're the best two things I've ever done for myself. They might be some of the only things I've ever done for myself, really deep down. But they've definitely been really, really useful. And I actually think everybody could do with a tune up with a therapist occasionally.
Ah, I say the same thing all the time with coaching and therapy. What do you feel like you get out of therapy and what do you feel like you get out of coaching?
Um, I think of the therapy bit as about being the now and the past.
Mm,
And is and for sure I think everybody has stuff in their past that they've not talked about or don't want to deal with. And so I've even though it wasn't why I went into therapy, that's what I've ended up on. Um, the coaching is about now and the future. Uh, so it kind of fits together. Fix the past, acknowledge the past, get the present right, and then working towards the future.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. A lot of the clients I work with are working with like a therapist and and a coach at the same time, and it's really, yeah, covers both sides, moving intentionally forward, but also recognizing the past and acknowledging it.
Yeah, I don't think you can move forward without acknowledging the past because you're just going to end up repeating the same patterns over and over again. So,
Yeah. Um, so I guess kind of coming to the kind of end of the conversation, what do you feel like you've learned from the last like 22 years in your career as a patent attorney?
I think for me it's been believe in myself,
Mm,
because like any, let's face it, any woman, lots of people, full stop, men as well, but most women suffer from kind of a lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. And I kind of wish I'd known earlier to believe in myself.
mm,
It's been something that's come later in my career, and I think if people can learn to believe in themselves earlier, actually they can have a much more fulfilling career, and it's easier to make it what you want it to be, and to follow your strengths, to follow your values, to make it work for you.
yeah. And sometimes we need someone to believe in us, but ultimately we need to believe in ourselves. Um, Doing therapy and coaching, all of that helps build that foundation as well.
For sure,
Uh, I
definitely.
guess talking about the future, what's next for you?
Who knows? The future's unwritten.
I guess one question that we ask everybody is like, what's one underrated skill that helps you build a sustainable and meaningful career?
I think for me it's compassion.
Mm,
So it's taking empathy and going one step further and wanting to use that empathy to do something for others, and on behalf of others. So I think empathy is really important as a leader, and for most careers, to understand other people. But yeah, taking that step further and being compassionate, and doing something about the reason that you feel the empathy.
yeah. I guess instead of asking, what do you want to be when you grow up, we kind of want to change that question. It's like, what's your why, or what's the problem you want to solve? So, what is that for you?
My why, my purpose. I've done a lot of work on purpose with coaches. And I think my purpose is about how do I support others to be the best they can be, to be happy. How do I support others? Making a difference to other people.
I love that. And it kind of merges that you wanted to make a difference in animals' lives. You wanted to be a doctor. You work in in healthcare, so that comes through all your work. Oh, thank you so much, Jane, for this conversation. It was really a pleasure having you, and lots to learn from you. And love the empathy and courage that you have across all your decisions and all your stories. So thank you, Jane.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. And of course, thank you to Jane for sharing her experience with us. If you enjoyed this episode and think that a friend or a family member might benefit from Jane's experience, please share it. Our goal is to demystify how career decisions are made in the real world and empower others to pursue a path towards a sustainable and meaningful life. Follow us at Major Confusions on LinkedIn for more of these episodes. Keep in mind the 3 C's: compassion, curiosity, and courage. See you next time.